Energy flow in an ecosystem. Organisms in an ecosystem. Organisms form an integral part of an ecosystem. When an organism feeds on another organism, energy is transferred from one organism to another. Thus, on this condition of feed and being feeded, a unidirectional flow of energy takes place in an ecosystem. Based on the mode of nutrition, organisms are classified into producers, consumers, saprophytes or decomposers, and parasites. Come, let us discuss about each of this type in brief. Producers. All organisms that produce their own food through the process of photosynthesis are called autotrophs or producers. Green plants are producers of the ecosystem. Consumers. All animals and few non-green plants that cannot prepare their food and depend on the autotrophs for their survival are called heterotrophs or consumers. These organisms are further classified into primary consumers, secondary consumers, apex or top consumers, and mixed consumers. Come, let us quickly go through each of the type one by one. Primary consumers. Primary consumers are herbivores that are directly dependent on autotrophs or producers for their food. Some examples of primary consumers are grasshopper, squirrel, and elephant. Secondary consumers. These consumers use herbivores as their food. Frog, owl, and fox are few examples of secondary consumers. Apex or top consumers. These consumers use herbivores and carnivores as their food. No other animals feed on these top consumers. Tiger and lion are two examples of apex or top consumers. Mixed consumers. Animals that feed on both plants and animals are called mixed consumers or omnivores. Human beings and bear are two examples of omnivores. Saprophytes or decomposers. Organisms which obtain their food from dead and decaying bodies of other organisms are called saprophytes or decomposers. Some bacteria and fungi are examples of saprophytes or decomposers. Parasites. Parasites are organisms that cannot live independently. They live inside or on the body surface of another organism called the host and obtain their food or nourishment from the host. Worms that live in the gut of animals and fleas that live on the skin of animals like dogs are all examples of parasites. Come, after studying about different types of consumers, let us observe which type of consumers are present in our surroundings. See this grasshopper? It is feeding on leaves. Therefore, it is a primary consumer. Look at this frog. It is eating a grasshopper, which is a herbivore. Therefore, it is said to be a secondary consumer. Look at Atul. He is eating baked rice for breakfast and is having fish curry for lunch. Therefore, we can say that Atul is an omnivore. Thus, after studying about living organisms according to the mode of nutrition, it won't be incorrect if we say that all organisms of the environment are dependent on each other directly or indirectly for their food. Here, we see that a grasshopper is feeding on the grass. This grasshopper is being eaten by a frog. A snake preys on the frog. The snake is caught and eaten by an eagle. When this eagle dies, the saprophytes feed on it and obtain their food. In this way, each organism over here is connected to each other by the need of food. Such a chain is called a food chain in an ecosystem. No food chain operates in isolation in nature. Individual food chains are interconnected to each other in some way or the other. Thus, in this way, a food web is formed. Come, let us gather some more information about food chain and food web. Food chain and food web. Interactions go on continuously between the organisms of the ecosystem. There is a definite sequence in these interactions which is called the food chain. Each food chain consists of 3, 4, 5 or even more links. Food chains are seen in all types of ecosystem. Come, let us look at some food chains of different ecosystems. In a grassland, the food chain begins with the green grass, which acts as the producer. The grass is eaten by a herbivore like a deer. The deer, in turn, is consumed by an apex consumer like lion. In an aquatic ecosystem such as pond, the food chain begins with the algae. The algae is eaten by small fishes, and the small fishes are eaten by big fishes. Many times, an organism may be the prey for many other organisms. For example, an insect feeds upon leaves of various plants, but the same insect is the prey for different animals like frog, lizard, birds, etc. This forms an intricate web instead of a linear food chain. Such an intricate network is called a food web. Food webs are found everywhere in nature. Pictures of various organisms are shown over here. Come, let us construct a food web from these pictures and answer a few questions. Is the number of consumers in a food web fixed? No, the number of consumers in a food web is not fixed. Due to complex interactions, the consumers too keep on changing in any natural food web. What will be the effect on an ecosystem if only one type of organism in it forms the food for several different consumers in that ecosystem? If only one type of organism in an ecosystem forms the food for several different consumers, then there would be shortage of food. As per the principle of survival of the fittest, only those who could grab the food will remain alive. If the food required by many consumers is finished, then the number of consumers in the ecosystem will fall down due to starvation. All this will result in imbalance of the ecosystem. Why is balance or equilibrium necessary in a food web? If there is no equilibrium in a food web, then the interactions within and among the different trophic levels of the ecosystems will not take place. If the number of producers is less than the number of consumers, it will lead to shortage of food and death of consumers due to starvation. If the number of apex consumers like tigers decrease due to excessive hunting, then the consumers like deer would increase in numbers. Their population will remain uncontrolled, resulting into overgrazing and total destruction of grasslands. Such consequences are harmful for any kind of ecosystem. Therefore, a balance or equilibrium is necessary in a food web. Come, after studying about the food chain and food web in detail, let us now proceed to study about each level in the food chain and energy transfer at each level in detail. Trophic levels. Each level in the food chain is called a trophic level. A trophic level is the step at which the organism obtains its food in the chain. All food chains begin with the green plants or the producers. So, the plants or the producers constitute the first trophic level. The herbivores or the primary consumers that feed upon plants constitute the second trophic level. The herbivores are next fed upon by the carnivores or the secondary consumers. They constitute the third trophic level. Finally, the large carnivores, also called the top carnivores or the tertiary consumers, form the fourth trophic level. Come, based on this information, let us make some interesting observations. Yash is having his meal at home. Can you tell the trophic level of each food item eaten by Yash and also his own trophic level in the chain? Yes, the rice and the salad that Yash is eating are obtained from plants, the producers of the ecosystem. Hence, they constitute the first trophic level. The goat feed upon the producers and obtain its food. Hence, the meat of goat that Yash is eating forms the second trophic level. Yash is feeding on both salad and rice, which are obtained from the producers, as well on the meat, which is obtained from a herbivore. Thus, we can say that Yash occupied the third trophic level in one food chain and second trophic level in another food chain. Energy pyramid. In a food chain, the amount of matter and energy gradually decreases from producers at lowest level to top consumers at the highest level. The energy transfer in any ecosystem takes place at each trophic level. There are different levels of energy exchange in the food chain. The initial quantity of energy goes on decreasing at every level of energy transfer. Similarly, the number of organisms also decreases from the lowest level to the highest level. This pattern of energy exchange in an ecosystem is called a pyramid of energy. All the energy used by living organisms is obtained from the sun. The solar energy enters the living components through the autotrophs or the green plants, where it gets converted into chemical energy. The food energy produced by plants is partially utilized by them, and a major part of it is lost as heat energy. The plants are then eaten up by the primary consumers, the herbivores, and the energy stored in the plants is transferred to these organisms. Part of the transferred energy is utilized by the herbivores, and most of the transferred energy is lost in the form of heat. When the herbivores are consumed by the carnivores, a part of the transferred energy is used up by the carnivores, while most of the transferred energy is released as heat energy. Therefore, we can say that there is a gradual decline in the amount of energy during its transfer from producers to apex consumers. Thus, for this reason, the number of tertiary consumers or the apex consumers are always less than those of other consumers. The number of consumers are always proportional to the energy available in each trophic level. Also, if the number of apex consumers would have been more than the other consumers, the food chain, the flow of energy, and the overall balance of the ecosystem would have been disturbed. The energy which is transferred to the apex consumers is continuously used up by them to carry out their various body functions, and major part of it is lost as heat energy till their death. After that, the remaining energy becomes available to the decomposers. Fungi and other microorganisms decompose the bodies of dead animals. They are called decomposers. In the process of obtaining food from the remains of organisms, decomposers convert them into simple carbon compounds. These substances easily mix with air, water, and soil, from where they are again absorbed by plants and incorporated into the food chain. Now, after understanding about the energy flow in an ecosystem and crucial role of decomposers in our environment, can you tell what would have happened if the energy remained trapped in the body of the apex consumers even after their death, or if there were no decomposers like microbes and fungi in nature? The nutrients and energy that has entered the ecosystem would have remained trapped in the food chains. Continuous circulation of nutrients and energy in the ecosystem would have been hindered. The waste matter would have piled in the ecosystem without the process of decomposition by the decomposers. This would further hinder the process of nutrients and energy cycling in the ecosystem. It is often said that the flow of energy in an ecosystem is unidirectional. Do you know why? Come, let us find out the reason for it. The sun is the most important source of energy in any ecosystem. Green plants store some of the energy in the form of food. Before reaching the decomposers, this energy is passed on from one trophic level to the next. Decomposers dissipate some amount of energy in the form of heat. However, no part of the energy ever returns to the sun. Such passage of energy is referred as one-way transport, and hence it is said that the energy flow in an ecosystem is unidirectional. An introduction to scientists. Lindemann in 1942 studied the food chain and energy flow through it. Charles Elton, a British scientist, first proposed the concept of the ecological pyramid in 1927 after his study of the tundra ecosystem of the Bear Islands in England. Hence, this pyramid is called the Eltonian Pyramid. Institutes at work. The Indian Institutes of Ecology and Environment, Delhi, was established in 1980 and is involved mainly in research, training, and arranging workshops and seminars. This institute has published the International Encyclopedia of Ecology and Environment. Come, after learning about the flow of energy in an ecosystem in detail, let us now proceed to study about cycling of nutrients in nature.